Good morning and welcome back to these online classes. We have been discussing on the expository preaching and anti-archaeology. Okay, and today we will go to expository preaching. We'll first finish up the expository preaching, then we'll go for the anti-archaeology. Okay. I think within 2-3 classes we will finish our course here. My course will be done, but the works will be for you. Okay. Last time we have been discussing on the step 1, step 2, and step 3, and today we are going to start step number 4. Okay, that is the purpose bridge. Okay, the purpose bridge. So let's go to our notes. Now, let's read. It is not all, it is we. Okay, we now come to the most critical part of the entire sermon preparation process. So, step number 4 is the most critical part of the entire sermon process, preparation process. Okay, when you cross this bridge, you will have gone far from studying the scripture, hermeneutical exercises towards preaching the scripture, the homiletical exercises. Now, step 1, 2, and 3 is with the exercise of the hermeneutical studies. That means how do we interpret the scripture? And step 1, 2, 3 has to do with hermeneutics. So if you are not clear with the hermeneutics, it is very much difficult. It will be very much difficult for you. In fact, it will not be possible for you to do step 1, 2, and 3 unless you learn hermeneutics well. Okay. So far we are doing hermeneutics, step 1, 2, and 3. Okay. And now this step number 4 is a bridge that connects the hermeneutics and the homiletics. Okay, hermeneutics and homiletics. Now step 4 is a bridge that bridges together so that you are going to jump to the other parts of your preparation, okay, of your studies. So step 4, to go from hermeneutics to homiletics or from your text to your sermon, it is not an easy task. Okay, it is very much critical. Okay, it is very much critical. So you have to you have to stand here and you have to work a lot over here. Okay. Step 4 is when you construct the cross the purpose bridge. Step number 4 is critical to making expository preaching relevant to the audience. By this time, much of the framework for the sped work for the sermon is already been done. The flesh, step 1, the skeleton, step 2, and the heart, step 3, and the text have been discerned. The skeleton of the body of the sermon has been formed with main points following the grammatical, the contents key for the in the passage. Now, sped work. Okay, when you do a works, when you cultivate a field, okay, you have sped work. Okay. You plow the ground or the mud, the soil, and then you make ready for every works that seed to be sown there. Okay. So now we will see. Okay, now we will see. See, the skeleton is there, the stone, the flesh is there, everything is collected. Now, the purpose bridge is the brain of the purpose of the sermon. It's a brain. Now, the brain is going to work. Okay, the brain is going to work. Now, nothing to study much over here, but step number 4, only a few person. You don't have to work much on the writing process. You don't have to study much, but what you have to do is you have to think a lot. Okay, you have to think a lot. Since this is a brain, so we have to use our brain to cross this bridge, okay, to cross this bridge from CPT to CPAs, from text to scripture, from your hermeneutics to homiletics. Okay, so I am not going to give you a lot of the explanation over here. I'm just going to give you the easiest way from your notes. So I am not going to read all the things, but the only things that you have to ask question, you can read for yourself, but for the class sake, the most important things in the purpose bridge is to ask 2 questions. Okay, see, connecting the purpose of your text and the purpose of your sermon. Okay, connecting the purpose of your text and the purpose of your sermon. In order to connect your purpose of your text and the purpose of your sermon, CPT and CPS, you have to ask 2 questions to bridge these 2. Okay, so your brain will bridge these 2. Okay, so the first question, what you have to ask here is, can I make an exegetical or theological cases that my sermon's purpose is compatible with the purpose of the text? The question enables one to be faithful to the text. Now the first question you are going to ask is, can I make an exegetical or theological point or the case with this text? Okay, with this text, can I make exegetical, can I make a theological point over here, or can I bring a case here? Case means your argument. Okay, your argument. For example, exegetical, you know what is exegetical. You are going to exegete one by one, words by words, or verse by verse. Exegetical. Theological, is there any theological point to present from the text? So you have to ask question from the text. Now you have studied the text, you have structured the text, you have the proposition of the text. Okay, proposition of the text, central proposition of the text. So you have all these things, you have divided and every raw material is collected here, and then now you have to think, can I make exegetical or theological sermon from this text? Can I bring can I bring things? Now you cannot think over anything else apart from your text. You have to study, you have to see from the text, what kind of sermon can I preach from this text? Okay, so that is number 1. Can I bring exegetical or theological? What is exegetical? Okay, you are going to bring background and all the things that the author is meant to say. You are going to bring it out, that one. Or are you going to take the theological terms or the theological message from that sermon or from that text? So when you ask a question to your text, now it is very much clear that you are faithful to your text and you're not going anywhere else. Okay, your sermon is based on the text, because every question that you ask from the text, you are going to bring it out there. Okay, so ask question to a text, what kind of sermon can you bring from this text? Number 1. Number 2 is, can I make a sociological or psychological case that my sermon's purpose is compatible with the need of my audience? Okay, the question enable one to be relevant to the audience. Now, the first question you ask is to the text. Okay, to the text. What kind of sermon can I bring from here? Is it theological or is it exegetical? Now, the next question is, so with this one, can it be relevant to my audience? For example, you are going to take the Ephesians chapter 5, and you're going to deal with that one. And in structuring, you will structure three main points. Okay, walk in wisdom, walk in light, and walk in love. Okay, so those things are Ephesians chapter 5 is relevant actually to the believers. Okay, the believers walk, or the believers, how can a believer live? Okay, that in that context, because Ephesians chapter 5 is talking about the church as the bride of Christ. So church is the bride of Christ, and our bridegroom is Jesus Christ. So Jesus Christ is going to come and marry. So we are already engaged. So as engaged in Jesus Christ, how can we live, or how should we live? So Paul is describing these things. Okay, now you're going to preach this one. Where? Okay, so you cannot preach this sermon to a new believer, or to a new to the unbeliever. To the unbeliever, they will not understand. So your sermon, okay, you are going to preach there with exegetical preaching, okay, but will it be relevant to your audience? Okay, so what kind of audience do you need? For example, you are going to preach to a church, and this is very much relevant to a church. Ephesians chapter 5 is relevant to to the church. So you have to see what kind of, will it be effective with this sermon to this audience. For example, the audience in the village area, the audience in the city's life. Okay, so when you preach, will it be applicable to these things to the city life? Will it be applicable to the village life? For example, you are going to preach from Matthew chapter 11 and verse 28. Come, those who are heavy burdened, and come unto me, I will give you rest. Okay, if any one of you have a heavy laden, okay, come unto me and I'll give you rest. Okay, if you are going to preach this one, which one will be more reliable, the town people or the village people? It is absolutely the village people, because they know, because the labor, they go to field, they know how they labor, and they know how helpful it is to take rest. Okay, so it will be very much applicable for the farmer to understand this scripture person. So we have to ask question whether it will be relevant to the audience. Okay, so the question that you are asking is, sociologically, is it okay? Psychologically, is it okay? Sociologically, as I said, okay, this cannot be to an unbeliever. Psychologically, they cannot understand. Okay, so this kind of sermon you should see to the audience. Okay, so when you construct the when you make an exegetical, or when you make the expository preaching, okay, this is an area where you have to think a lot. You have to think a lot. Okay, so number one, what you have to think is, okay, what kind of sermon can I draw from this text? Because the text explanation, hermeneutics, everything will be same, but what kind of sermon can you draw from this text? There will be 2-3 sermons that you can bring it out, depending on the audience that you have. Okay, depending on the audience. So you have to see, okay, will it be applicable to my audience, or will it be relevant to my audience? Okay, so that also you have to see. Okay. So 2 questions mixed together, and it has to be synchronized. The text and the audience should be synchronized, or it should be relevant to each other, and so that you can bring this sermon there. So you cannot preach this Ephesians chapter 5 everywhere that you go. Okay, everywhere that you go. Okay, so the audience must fit there. For example, you are going to preach to the theological students. Okay, And it will be very good for you if you can bring some theological studies or theological case from your text, so that all these seminary or the Bible college students will understand the theology from the text that you're preaching. Okay, so you see two things. It should be you should be faithful to your text, and it should be relevant to your audience. Okay, so these are the two things that you have to understand from this purpose bridge. Okay, it would be very easy to listen, but to work it out, it is very much critical. It is very much hard. So spend time here. Okay, spend time here. You are working on Ephesians chapter 5. Okay, you have I hope you finish step number 1, step number 2, step number 3, and step number 4. You got nothing to write down, but what you have to ask is, what kind of sermon can I draw from this text? Number 1. And number 2 is, what kind would it be applicable to my audience? Okay, so bring these two together and then try to make it. Okay, I will give you a clue. This sermon is applicable for the believers. Okay, so focus on a believer. Okay, focus on a believer. So when you focus on a believer, now you come to the text. Would it be, what kind of sermons can I bring from this text? Okay, so these are the two questions that you can ask in this step number 4. Okay, so please do this exercise. Okay, step number 4, just 2 questions to ask. Okay, what kind of sermon can I bring from this text? Is it exegetical or is it theological cases that I can bring from this? Or another question is, would it be applicable to my audience or relevant to my audience? Okay, so these are the 2 things that you have to understand, because if you bring the theological terms, and if you are going to preach to the new believer, okay, they will not understand the theology also. Okay, so it is very hard. So you have to connect your text and your audience together for your sermon. So next class we will see, we will go to CPS. Okay, central proposition of the text. Okay, chapter step number 5. Till then, we'll have we'll just run off our class from here. Have a nice time. God bless you.